I had to learn some hard lessons throughout the year on demanding the value of what I've paid for, choosing to sever ties when I don't see myself getting that value, or when people start being shady and trying stunts. I don't play like that anymore. Hey, dreamers, welcome back to the Dreaming Forward podcast. It's been a minute, I know. What y'all been up to? What you been doing? I have had quite a few life changes, and so I wanted to start out this first episode with just explaining what's been going on. I have had a lot that's been happening in my personal life, in my professional life. So let's get into it. The last episode you all saw from me, I think, was January the 25th of last year. And that, man, first of all, I record episodes usually in batches just because that's the timing that works for me. I recorded those really at the end of 2022, and I had no idea the direction that the year was going to turn. I was like, I'm going to post these up. I'll be good. By the time the end of the month hits, I should be on it, ready with my new contracts. And that just did not happen. I ended up having to let go of my entire team shortly before I recorded that last batch of episodes. I'll get back to that in a second. And I ended up having to let go of the team that I hired later on, so some months later. And I had to reorganize my entire company, my whole business model, my whole approach to my work. So let's start with the reorg, because I think that will explain why I had to make some of the staffing decisions that I made. I have had my consulting agency for now 8 years. I opened in 2016, and I always knew that I wanted to do executive coaching. At the time, I considered it more just leadership coaching. But again, I wanted to coach leaders at the very least. Now I know executives. And in addition to the coaching aspect, I wanted to do HR consulting. But I knew even back then that it wasn't just going to be your average run of the mill HR consultant. I like to focus more on strategy. That was always my thing. So I start this company. I'm working full time and going to grad school full time pretty much the entire time that I'm running my company. And that just became my rhythm. I will focus on trying to scale up certain services. I did everything from just straight one-on-one, 1 hour session by 1 hour session coaching. I did tarot card reading. If y'all can believe it, I don't do that anymore. So unfortunately, if you're looking for those services, I can't help you. But I tried all types of models. I tried going for just straight consulting, just running it out there, and of course got no responses because consulting is not necessarily that easy to get clients with. um but the first few years, honestly, I was just teaching myself how to be an entrepreneur. And because I had a full-time job that paid more than enough money, I never felt compelled to go as hard to get clients, because again, I was taken care of through the jobs that I worked. And at the same time, I knew I had a lot to learn. So I'm one of the few members of my family, and I mean extended family, who has reached executive level in their career and also that has been an entrepreneur. I think I might can count on one hand how many of us have done that. So it's a lot to be able to learn, looking for mentorship, looking for courses, looking for information online. And it just was not that easy. So, I wasn't concerned with blowing my revenue goals out of the water. In fact, I don't even think I really had revenue goals for the first few years. So when 2020 hit, I ended up being furloughed from a job that I worked at that time. I won't name the company. And all of a sudden, I'm on unemployment and I need to make money fast. Well, that's how I ended up formally launching a DEI consulting vertical, because when everything happened with George Floyd, I don't know if I get strikes for saying certain words. So I'll just say the George Floyd incident, but we all know what happened. When that happened, there was such a huge interest in DEI, and folks knew that I was a practitioner because I did it in house at companies. And all of a sudden, people were asking me to teach classes on anti racism and do DEI strategy work. And I was able to respond really quickly because, again, I've spent the last 4 years teaching myself how to do marketing and design websites. And I already knew how to design training decks and train because that's what I did for a living. So starting in 2021, and for most of 2022, business was booming. I am working a full-time job at the executive level. I am in my PhD program, taking coursework and working on my dissertation, as well as relocating. I think during that time I relocated like 2 or 3 times, and right, just trying to have a personal life and doing this company. So I mean, I had no time to think, no time to really plan. I'm just doing, as service delivery had been my focus. Around the end of, the summer of 22, I started to notice that the market was shifting a little bit in terms of the market for HR and diversity and inclusion. And because I am not only an HR practitioner or a DEI practitioner, I'm an organizational psychologist. So I do a lot of the planning, the strategy, and the back end work for this stuff. So I have a very different view of what's happening in the market. And I was like, something tell me that layoffs are coming. I was like, it just feels very weird in the industry. And at the time I was working this other full-time job, and everybody was like, that's crazy. Nothing's going to happen. I was like, I'm telling y'all, it looked like people probably going to start getting laid off. And nobody believed me. I started talking to the team about it. I was like, look, we need to hurry up and try to lock in the 2023 money and contracts because some tell me it's about to get weird. And nobody believed me again. So I'm going. By the time the fall hits, it's clear that something is happening. And I was like, I need to rethink my plan. I think it's about time for me to go into full-time entrepreneurship faster than I originally thought. Because I was planning on transitioning to full-time entrepreneurship this year, like 2024, no later than 2025. Y'all, it got real fast. And you know how jobs start playing with you? Like all of a sudden, everything you do is just like a little irritating. What's going on with this? All these little mini performance reviews. It's like an informal pit. And I was like, I'm not gonna let y'all play on my top. Like, I do this for a living. When I say I do this for a living, I really mean it. I do this for a living. Stop playing with me. I know that my work is impeccable. You looking for a reason because you trying to clear head count. And transparently, I knew that if I wasn't the highest paid, I was one of the highest paid in my title level between the bonuses and stock and all that stuff. So they would clear a lot of budget to clear me off of the roster. So I'm like, let me make it easy for everybody because I don't have time to play. Let me go on a skedaddle because I've had experiences before where I waited to see what was going to happen. And by the time I ended up getting laid off, now I'm fighting against all the other talent that's looking at the same time. And I'm not on my own timeline. So I was like, let me just get out of here. At the time, I'm expecting to have all these contracts. I have a team of like 2 or 3 people who I think are like, yes, we're going to work together. We're going to make this happen. Y'all, within like 7 to 14 days, the whole thing blew up. I leave this job making nice money, like real nice money with real nice benefits, huge savings, little nest egg, lots of money put up in the 401k, lots of money saved in the business, even with me investing back, making sure people got paid before they could even invoice me for service. Like, I'm taking care of business. Like, the money is flowing and I'm putting it in the right places. So I leave, and I've always been a person that loves conferences. But again, I work a full-time job, so I can't go to different business conferences unless it's something that maybe is happening locally or it's on the weekend. So there was one conference that was in Atlanta. I go to this conference and a woman was there, ironically, at the company that I just left. And so I'm doing everything I can to walk around their booth because I'm like, I do not want to talk to these people. I want nothing to do with these folks. And she happened to stop me because the room was kind of empty then. I think it might have been a breakout session or something, but people weren't in the expo area at that time. So she and I ended up talking. And she goes, sis, you got your own company. You need to go to such and such conference. It's coming up real soon in New Orleans. And I was like, I don't know because I'm trying to be kind of cautious with my money. I just left my full-time job. And she was like, no, sis, you need to be at this conference. And it ended up being the NMSDC National Conference. And that kicked off a whole new path for me. I ended up traveling almost nonstop for about 4 months. And I spent most of the cash that I had just kind of sitting on traveling to these conferences. While it didn't produce a ton of contracts right away, what it did, it opened my eyes to how much I had mishandled my company. And when I say that, I mean I had spent so much time working in the business. I basically had spent no time, none, working on the business. I realized that there was so much from an administrative point of view that needed to happen that just hadn't been happening. It wasn't that I was mishandling funds. I had a business bank account and I wasn't commingling and all of that good stuff. But just in terms of preparing my company to thrive as a company, I just wasn't there. And I had a choice to make. Either I could sit and wallow in shame and wonder why I hadn't done all these things, or I could get to work. And I realized I'm like, I got to get to work because now I don't work a full time job. My company is my job, so I need to get to it. And I started the long, arduous process of working on my business. So I realized that I didn't have any formal sales processes. I didn't have a formal sales strategy, a marketing strategy. What was I doing? I didn't have any of that in hand. So I got to work creating that. From that, I realized how important in person or even like webinar attendance is for my marketing, because that FaceTime is what helps me to set myself apart in a sea of consultants and coaches. Because my field, to be honest, is kind of overrun with people. But when folks are able to engage with me in person and see my personality and my passion and excitement, it makes a difference. Another thing that was super helpful for me was to see that there were things like business certifications, professional associations for the company that I had neglected to pursue. I was doing everything in my individual career, right, to be a great individual contributor or IC. I was getting the certifications and the things that mattered for my work. But in terms of shoring up my company to have a level of readiness to get certain types of clients, it just wasn't there. So I started that process of researching which certifications I would need, which associations and clubs and groups were important to be a part of. Where could I network? Where could I find support so that I wouldn't be lonely as an entrepreneur? So that was a whole process. But that takes money. And so again, in my mind, there were clients that I've been working with. They're like, yeah, we're gonna resign, it's no problem. And again, I'm used to getting money with clients. I had clients who would pay 5-figure invoices within like 2-3 business days, like popping like that for a few years. So I said, okay, cool, let's move it, let's go. And again, now it's about November, and I'm realizing that money is slowing down fast. So this has been about 30 days. So I get on a call with the team and I say, hey, y'all, like, it's about to get real. I could already see what's about to happen in the market. It's getting very weird. I got a bad feeling. We need to hurry up and change courses quick. Like, I'm talking about pivot like today. We need to sit down, have like a 3-hour strategic planning session, figure out new direction, and just get to it. And I said, this is really important to me because I know y'all either have 9-to-5 jobs or other clients, but this is now my livelihood. And I'm being transparent with y'all. I can't afford to let this slip. Like, I have to get on it. Y'all, these people's response was, well, I don't know. I think we need to just slow down. Like, why are we trying to go so fast? We need to just slow it down because I don't know. And it made me furious. And I'm not ashamed to say that I felt it wasn't just being furious, it was hurtful. It was frustrating. It was insulting. It was demeaning because first of all, one of these people I considered a really close friend of mine. This is a person who I paid probably almost 6 figures between the actual cash to pay, because we were doing like a 60-40 split of the money. Even though I was doing most of the work, all of the sales work, all of the marketing work, I paid for this person to get certifications that they can use for the rest of their lives. I paid for vacations, brand new computers, all types of hardware, anything they asked and said that they needed to do their work. Whether or not the work was actually being done, I found out later. I paid it. The amount of money I invested in this person was crazy. The other team member, they didn't even have to send an invoice for their services. I was paying it right away. Boop, 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 no question. Even though again, I wasn't getting the production. The other person who wasn't even working, they were using up the hours. So in that moment, it just became very clear what I had refused to see for months. I could finally see, like, oh no, ma'am, you on your own with this. Like, these folks, lovely people, great gowns, beautiful gowns, but they're not about to help with this change. This is a you thing. And so I realized fast, listen, it's easier to steer a ship if you lighten the load. So I politely sent them their separation notices and paid people out for what I owed them as quickly as I could, and got to the business of redirecting and reorganizing my company. It was hurtful. I spent the holiday season in a deep depression because that was like early November. So I spent Thanksgiving and Christmas in a deep depression because here I had spent the whole year just trying to plan to put something together for all of us. And to see it blow up in my face like that was just, it was hard to even fathom. I just never could have imagined it went like that. And then it started to get worse. So January comes, all of my contracts fall through. Not a couple, all. So I am quickly burning through my savings just to stay afloat. I'm cutting expenses where I can, but you can only cut so much. So I'm burning through my savings. I end up having to cash out then. I mean, it was like nuts. And I couldn't believe it because I'm a kid who grew up in poverty. I'm a kid who grew up not having enough. I spent my young adult years, my 20s, barely making it. So to get to a point, it wasn't about balling, but to be able to just put my bills on auto pay and not have to worry if I got to rob Peter to pay Paul, that was so comforting to me. It freed up so much headspace to be creative. And so to get thrown right back in that position out of nowhere, it was so disorienting. And so I sank deeper into a depression. While all of this is happening, I'm still trying to fight my way through and go to school, fight my way through, trying to get contracts, going to all of these conferences to meet people. And while all of that is happening, I'm taking classes to learn more about what it means to be an entrepreneur in these current times. Again, at this point, I haven't really taken entrepreneurship classes in like 4 or 5 years, and the market has changed significantly. So I did development course and accelerator program after development course and accelerator program. And in each of them, I realized, I'm like, okay, this information is good, but this could be better. Here's another way to approach it. And they kept asking me for my advice. And I'm like, I'm in the class just like you. I don't know, you getting 10 million, 20 million in revenue. Why are you asking me? But I realized like, oh, you have something that makes sense to you that's hard for other people to understand. And they trust you to share it and explain it. And that was my clue and my aha moment of like, oh, that's a new service. I want to support other businesses with growing. And I realized that I had always been mentoring other business owners, even when I had just started out. That's when I realized that a huge part of the reason that happened is because I have trained and worked at building up organizations. That was always a part of my job, even when I worked for other people. And that was the start of my new accelerator program, the Fast Forward Accelerator, which is now one of my flagship services. I enjoy it so much. Now that I'm doing it, I don't know why I wouldn't have thought to do it before, but this is what I mean when you're working on so many things, you can't really focus on the thing that brings you joy and purpose. Along the way, I also realized that I was hemorrhaging money on things that were not bringing me anywhere close to the ROI that I deserved. The amount I was paying to various vendors and contractors for all types of things, people had gotten so used to me just saying, okay, cool. Yep, I'll pay. No problem. Because I don't like to argue with people about their prices. I feel uncomfortable doing that because I don't like when people do it to me. I don't like when people try to underpay me, undercut me. So I try not to do it to others. And I had to realize that if I don't put a boundary around that, people would just take advantage. You can't always be nice in business. And so I had to learn some hard lessons throughout the year on demanding the value of what I've paid for, choosing to sever ties when I don't see myself getting that value, or when people start being shady and trying stunts. I don't play like that anymore. I will back up quickly and happily. And that's that. Like, I don't have any problem severing ties. Additionally, I learned again to do things myself. So when I first started out, I was super scrappy in my company because, again, I'm just trying stuff to see what lands. And I was able to get back to that last year. I learned how to edit videos and make shorts and create new sales pipelines and trying new technology and using different workflows and all kinds of fun stuff that I actually enjoy. I would never have done that if I had still been working again in the business versus on the business. And I'm proud of myself for that. That's a blessing to me because it's something that I can use not only to help myself, but also to make money because now those are services I can offer other people. I also learned that people talk a lot of stuff, but when it's time to put that money up, people get very quiet. The amount of people who, oh, I'm investing in your business, let's partner, and then go silent when you say, okay, so what's that? Put it on the floor. What's up? The silence is deafening. Unbelievable. So I've learned a lot about funding. So I wish I had known about it before all of this happened, because then I probably wouldn't have had so much, so much financial turmoil. But now I know about the difference between debt instruments versus equity versus having VC funding versus the benefits of bootstrapping. I didn't really know all of that because remember, I have a full-time job. So anytime I really need some money for my business, I work overtime or I just take part of my check and then go on a payment plan for another bill because I know in 2 weeks I'm going to have money and I'm going to have enough to take care of it. So I had to learn how to think very differently about money in my company. Finally, on the professional side, I learned that I have total control over my time, and this now transitions into the personal life. Last year, I lost my last surviving parent, and I had a choice when my father passed to either just push through and keep going like nothing had happened, like I did when my grandmother passed, or I could take a break. And even if I didn't feel like I was grieving, I could be proactive in giving myself rest and time to process. So I chose to do that. It felt uncomfortable because I'm not the type of person that likes to stop. I don't like to take a step back. I needed money, right? I needed some of those projects to come through. But I knew from having to learn the hard way when my mother and grandmother passed that when you push through, you set yourself up to have some major blowback. And I could not afford that. So I took time off for about really a month and a half. I reorganized my house, hence this beautiful setup, which is totally different than the other setup y'all are used to. And at the time, it felt so uncomfortable, but I needed that because, first of all, my father and I had been estranged for well over a decade, and he had been pretty much a deadbeat for most of my life. Like, I spent time with his family, but never him, and that was because of his choice. I got a chance to have conversations with him in person literally for the first time in my life, to sit down and have a real one-on-one conversation. It had never happened. And I got to learn some hard truths. I didn't like everything he said, but I could understand why certain things happened the way they happened. I could understand his culpability in the way things played out. Also, my mother's culpability. And having that balanced perspective and understanding of my childhood was so necessary. And when we met up, I didn't know it then, but he had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And he passed like 4 months after that. So if I hadn't listened to the Holy Spirit, who told me to go meet up with him, if I hadn't heeded that warning and that command, there are answers that I need as an adult and little me needed so bad, I never would have gotten a chance to get those answers. So again, a lot has happened. I think that's the most significant in my personal life. The other parts, they kind of weave into the personal part, learning to trust myself, learning new coping mechanisms, learning to manage my mental health uh, and anxiety and feelings of inadequacy and imposter syndrome, and learning to be so much bolder, which people wouldn't assume. Folks always think like, Kalyn, you just do it. And they don't know how hard that is for me sometimes. I'm still a human. So learning to do that on another level while still protecting myself, those were invaluable lessons. So that's where I've been. That's where I've been. That's what I've been doing. I'm back. I am going back to the weekly podcast posting, so look out for that. I should be showing up in some new places too. I'm figuring that part out again. Is me getting that admin stuff together. And you're also going to see a new segment from me called Out of Scope. One of the things that I learned in being able to take classes and do research is that even the folks who we think are the villain have a lot to teach us about leadership. And so you are going to see Out of Scope, which is a podcast segment that will show us the admirable and perhaps positive qualities in the folks who we are taught to think of as villains in TV and movies. So I'm really excited about that. I'm actually very excited about the first person we'll be profiling, but I'll get to that a little bit later in the episode. And you're going to see me again having my monthly topics. You're going to see a little bit of the Dear Little Sis segment. I'm still deciding what I want to do with that, so just stay tuned. And yeah, you're just gonna be able to hear from me. I'm excited about doing the podcast again. I actually really missed it, but I knew that a new story was being rewritten, and I didn't feel that it would be appropriate to work on that story or share that story until I got it to a point. Maybe that's the perfectionist in me. In the meantime, let me intro the topic for the next few weeks. Through the end of April, because I think by the time this is posted, it'll be like mid-March. Through the end of April, I want to spend time with everyone talking about resilience. I know that the past really 4 years, but especially the last year and a half, has been really overwhelming. And I want to affirm for you that your willingness to keep pushing through it has not gone unnoticed. So I want to spend time talking about what is resilience, share my own stories of resilience and the stories of people who I've had the pleasure of meeting throughout this process over the last year and a half. And I'm hoping that I can give you some nuggets about how to have a level of individual resilience, team resilience, and organizational resilience that hopefully will help you support the volatility that we're experiencing. So I am looking forward to this. I'm back, y'all. Finally. I'm so excited. Y'all don't even know. I really miss doing this podcast. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you have not already, be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and share button. Share this widely. Let folks know how important it is to get this information. And I will see you soon. Bye, dreamers.